Good evening. I'm Alison Stewart, filling in for Charlie Rose. We begin this evening with politics. President Trump delivered a highly anticipated address to a joint session of Congress last night. He defended his administration's first 5 weeks in office and vowed to reach across party lines to achieve legislative goals, including rebuilding the nation's highways and roads.
If we are guided by the well-being of American citizens, then I believe Republicans and Democrats can work together to achieve an outcome that has eluded our country for decades. Another Republican president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, initiated the last truly great national infrastructure program, the building of the interstate highway system. The time has come for a new program of national rebuilding.
The tone and content of last night's speech marked a reversal from the dire landscape that the president articulated during his inaugural address in January.
A new chapter of American greatness is now beginning. A new national pride is sweeping across our nation, and a new surge of optimism is placing impossible dreams firmly within our grasp. What we are witnessing today is the renewal of the American spirit.
The question for many is, which President Trump should we expect moving forward? Joining me now from Washington is David Rennie. He is Washington bureau chief and Lexington columnist for The Economist. Also in Washington is Ed O'Keefe. He is a congressional reporter for The Washington Post. And here with me in New York is Megan Murphy. She's editor-in-chief of Bloomberg Businessweek. The latest issue of the magazine profiles top Trump advisor Stephen Miller. Welcome to all of you. We've had 24 hours to digest this speech. So, David, I want to throw to you first. Obviously, the president was physically speaking in front of Congress, but he was spiritually and sort of psychologically reaching out to his base. What did he say that made them happy, made them know they supported the right candidate?
That's exactly the right question to ask. And I found myself watching the speech last night and waiting to hear details finally filled in on, how is he going to sort of fund that infrastructure that he talks about? What will be his tax plan? When those details didn't come, and I realized that I guess people like us who are trying to work out what Donald Trump's agenda is are still disappointed. We don't know. I then was asking, how come his supporters, who I meet out when I go to rallies and political meetings, how come they are so absolutely certain that he is keeping his promises and they're so happy that he's doing what he said he would do? And it occurred to me that what's really going on, I think, is that we in Washington or you in New York, we're very focused on what politicians do. Donald Trump's genius is to be the guy who can tell you who he's doing it for. He's standing for his people. Last night, he broadened the frame a bit to being he's the guy who represents the champion for all American citizens, who will put American citizens ahead of foreigners, ahead of illegal immigrants, ahead of kind of global rivals who are trying to do America down. But he'll tell you who he's for. We're still wanting to know what he's for. And I think that explains a lot of the gap.
Megan, let's talk about what wasn't covered in the speech last night. We didn't hear about climate change. We didn't hear about economic inequality. What was a glaring omission for you and why?
We did have a quick shout out to clean air and clean water.
After talking about the EPA.
Good. I mean, I think we have to be honest in that this was a good moment for him. He had two objectives last night. He wanted to reset his image with the American people, and he wanted to reset his image with his own party. He's got some incredibly difficult battles to fight ahead in terms of getting his legislative agenda ahead. And David is exactly right. While we don't know details, we do know getting forward a comprehensive tax reform plan and getting forward an Affordable Care Act, repeal and replace, and what's going on with Obamacare is going to be very difficult. I think in terms of the omission, in terms of where he could have and should have done more, was number one on fleshing out the details of the things that could have been a very easy win for him, and I think a bipartisan win.
For example?
One of those is infrastructure. Okay. Now, if you look, we showed a little bit of a clip there, but when you look at this administration, you look at some of the missteps and the mistakes they've had, which have been immense. One of them was obviously the immigration order rollout and the refugee from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. But I think when you look back at the early days of this Trump presidency, and if he turns out to be a relatively unsuccessful president in getting his agenda set forward, one will be he missed this opportunity to really put the screws on the wheels. Everyone is calling for infrastructure reform. He would have put his own party, in terms of a really true stimulus budget, forward and put them in a difficult place to reject it and really started on something that could have been a bipartisan move forward for him. I think that was a bit of an own goal, again, not to press it harder last night.
Ed, 2 weeks ago, you and I were sitting here discussing that 77-minute rollicking press conference. Now, the speech we saw last night, it felt like to me that it was candidate Trump's stump speech put through an auto-tune, right? You know, that's the program that record producers use to sort of smooth out the edges and get people back on pitch. Did you hear anything new and different?
Well, I think his general approach and the fact that he was able to come into that room, command it, and deliver a State of the Union-like address proves that this is somebody who, at least to nervous Republicans, is capable of at least appearing presidential and delivering and laying out an agenda. The specifics be damned at this point. You know, I did hear a little more specificity, not much, but a little bit more about sort of where they want to go on Obamacare, where they want to go on tax reform. He did not get into discussion of immigration reform in ways that he has privately now twice in the last 2 weeks with senators and with news anchors talking about the idea of a broader immigration bill. And part of the reason we didn't hear more about infrastructure spending, frankly, is because the biggest, most important audience he had to address there last night and to impress, I don't think was the American public. It was those hundreds of Republicans in the room who for the last several weeks, with little guidance from the White House, have been squabbling amongst themselves about how exactly to do a new health care system in this country, about how exactly to reform the tax system, how to pay for a border wall, and a host of other issues. And so the fact that he didn't get into the issues where he might be able to find some more bipartisan accord wasn't just because Democrats right now aren't in the mood to work with him and don't feel that he's done anything to win them over, but also because the next few months for him and for Republicans are probably going to be the most critical of the last several years, because this is their one and only opportunity to prove that they can actually govern and make changes after years of threatening to do so if they ever had power.